Should you take the GMAT or the GRE if you're going after your MBA? The answer may surprise you, but in about 5 minutes, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to make the right decision for you. Also, just for being here today, I have a free gift for you. 3 simple strategies to raise your GMAT score 30 points today. These are the same strategies I teach all of my private students. They work really well. They're going to help you a lot, and they're free. You can download yours right there in the description. Okay, let's dive into the GMAT versus the GRE. These are the things we're going to talk about. Which schools accept which test? The answer to that question surprises most people, and we're going to go over it. Are you going to be penalized if you don't take the GMAT? By the way, what is the difference between the GRE and the GMAT? Which one is easier? And most importantly, how do you know which test is the right one for you? We're going to cover all of that. Let's dive in. Okay, which schools take which test? The reality is, nowadays, generally every business school accepts either a GRE or a GMAT score. And when I mean every one, I'm talking like Harvard and Wharton and London Business School, etc. In fact, the only one that I can think of off the top of my head that won't take a GRE score is INSEAD outside of Paris. So there's really no penalty for not taking the GMAT. And if that seems a little strange to you, remember, if you're an electrical engineering PhD candidate applying to Stanford, you still have to take the GRE. The GRE is no joke. Now, this can change, so be sure to check with your target school just to be sure. So what is the difference between the GRE and the GMAT? So generally speaking, the quant on the GMAT tends to be more conceptual and people tend to find it a little bit harder, and the quant on the GRE tends to be more like executional and people tend to find it a little bit easier. Now the GRE requires you to memorize about 500 to 700 vocab words if you're a native English speaker, and about 700 plus words if English isn't your first language. So more specifically, they're each going to have a quant section. They're each going to ask you reading comp passage type questions. They're each going to have critical reasoning or logical reading type questions. The GMAT will ask you sentence correction type questions, which are essentially grammar questions. The GRE has 2 question types that focus on vocabulary, sentence completion and sentence equivalency, which is why vocabulary is so important for the GRE. They will also each ask you essays. Now, these essays are scored separately. The GMAT makes you write 1 essay. The GRE makes you write 2 essays. The GMAT also has an integrated reasoning section. Again, that's scored separately, but the GRE does not. Okay, let's talk about the structure of the test. The GMAT quant, it's 1 section, it's 31 questions in 62 minutes. The GRE quant, it's 2 sections. It's 20 questions per section, and you get 30 minutes for each section. On the verbal for the GMAT, it's 1 section, it's 36 questions at 65 minutes. The GRE, again, it's 2 sections of 20 questions per section, and you get 30 minutes per section. The essays, again, scored separately. The GMAT is going to have you write 1 essay in 30 minutes. The GRE is going to have you write 2 essays, and you get 30 minutes for each essay. And again, the GMAT does have this integrated reasoning section. It's 12 questions in 30 minutes. The GRE does not have an integrated reasoning section. So one of the big differences between these tests is how the scoring works. So the GMAT is adaptive by question. What that means is the GMAT is going to ask you 1 question at a time, and depending on whether you get that question right or wrong, it's going to give you a harder or easier question. That's true on both the quant and the verbal. What that means is that taking the GMAT is pretty non-intuitive. First of all, you can't skip questions. Second, the scoring algorithm cares a lot more about how hard the questions were that you got right and wrong, rather than the number that you got right and wrong. In fact, the GMAT is set up so kind of regardless of your score, you miss about 1/3 of the questions per section. It's a very non-intuitive way to take a test. The GRE is more intuitive. The GRE is adaptive by section. What that means is everyone takes the same first section, the first quant or verbal section, and depending on how you did on that section, you trigger a harder section that is worth more points per question, or an easy section that's worth fewer points per question. That means that you can move around between questions, and generally the GRE, just as you take the test, seems a little bit more intuitive to most people. So which test is easier? The truth is that really depends on you. There's fiddly executional math, which is kind of on the GRE. Then you have less fiddly but more conceptual math, which is on the GMAT. You have to memorize a lot of vocabulary words for the GRE versus memorizing basically no vocabulary words for the GMAT. And there's also this business of writing 2 essays versus writing 1 essay. Okay, so which test should you take? Keep in mind the most important thing. These tests have one goal and one goal only. Get you into business school. That's it. You should take the test that you feel most comfortable with, and I recommend that you take a practice test of each. You can find an official GMAT practice test at MBA.com, and you can find an official GRE practice test at ETS.com, and I will apologize ahead of time for these websites. They're not great. They're not a great design. They're a little tough to navigate, but they will give you a free practice test so you can try it out and see which one you're most comfortable with. Okay, so that's how it works. The most important thing is find the test that you can do your best on. What you don't want to do is think, oh, I want to go to a top business school, so I have to take a GMAT. That's just not true. I get people into top schools with GRE scores. I get people into top schools with GMAT scores. That doesn't matter. What does matter is that you do really, really well on whichever test you choose to take. Okay, now if you found this video helpful, please make sure to hit like or subscribe. Also, don't forget about your free gift. 3 simple strategies to raise your GMAT score 30 points today. All right, good job. We'll see you next time.